Welcome to Asia Pacific Defence Reporter, your go-to source for cutting-edge security insights in the region. Get ready for rapid-fire analysis and commentary from the Asia Pacific with your host, Kim Bergman.
Hello and welcome back. Of course, the big news at the moment is the US and Israeli attacks on Iran, but I won't dwell on these because the media loves a good war and there seems to be rolling 24-hour coverage of the detail, even though it's only indirectly connected with Australia. Part, of course, from the inconvenience of some disrupted flights, and I feel sorry for the people affected. News directors love slow-motion explosions and interviews with people calling themselves experts, and it's very easy TV coverage and a very easy way of also filling pages of print. But before moving on to things of much greater relevance for Australia, I concluded my last podcast by saying I was not sure of the objectives of the impending strike on Iran. A week later, I am no wiser, but what I have my doubts about is the wisdom of our government supporting an operation that's contrary to international law. Not that many people care about that these days. Now, the issue is that the Iranian theocracy is truly awful. A bunch of mass murderers of their own people and an exporter of terrorism. But will killing the country's leaders and bombing the few remaining military facilities cause the regime to fall and be replaced by a vibrant, shining democracy? I doubt that very much, though I would be pleased to be proven wrong. I'll leave Iran for today with the final observation that no one else seems to be making, and that is Iran had agreed to give up their nuclear weapons program under an agreement called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, signed in 2015. However, it was wrecked when President Trump 1.0 withdrew from the plan in 2018, leading to Iran resuming their weapons program. And you can find plenty of clips of him online ranting and raving that it was the worst agreement in the history of the universe. Was it perfect? No, it was not. But the general consensus is that it seriously curtailed Iran's ability to produce weapons because of, among other things, regular inspections of the country's nuclear facilities. However, for the last 30 years, US foreign policy for the Middle East has been dictated by Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu had no difficulty persuading Trump to walk away from the deal. So, having been a major cause of the current problem, President Trump is now bombing Iran to fix it. On top of that, it was only in June of last year, when the US followed Israel in bombing all of Iran's nuclear sites, that according to President Trump, very loudly, they had been completely obliterated. This means that to now claim that Iran is a direct and imminent threat to the United States would seem to be a complete lie, and the Australian government knows that. I heard Foreign Minister Penny Wong this morning hiding behind the ridiculous justification that she wasn't going to call out the US for lying because she did not have access to the same intelligence information as the US and Israel have, implying that somehow Iran might have magically created thermonuclear warheads and intercontinental ballistic missiles in just a few months. My immediate concern is for Iranian protesters and Trump again urging them on to take to the streets and to overthrow the weakened regime. Now, unless the US and Israel have been secretly supplying massive quantities of weapons to rebel groups inside Iran, any popular uprising risks costing tens of thousands of lives. And all of that US and Israeli air power is of not much use supporting an uprising unless you have experienced people on the ground with secure radios, with satellite links, coordinating airstrikes in real time. And I strongly suspect that Donald Trump doesn't understand any of this with his characteristic lack of attention to detail. But let's hope I'm wrong, and that the regime sort of fades away and is replaced by something democratic and humane. As for why it's happening now, there's no reason I can see. My theory, for what little it's worth, is that the success of the Venezuela operation has gone to his head and he enjoys moving aircraft carriers around the globe and blowing things up. As for the continuing support of Republicans in the United States, it's so obvious. Starting foreign wars is only wrong when Democrats do it. When Republicans do it, it's absolutely fine. And I'll end with a little quibble, a very minor one, about the media coverage of the air campaign and incessant references to Israel's Iron Dome shooting down all the incoming Iranian missiles. In doing so, people only reinforce their own ignorance of security matters. For what it's worth, Israel has a 3-tier missile defense shield, of which Iron Dome is the inner layer, a point defense system that's optimized for destroying incoming targets at the smaller end of the range, such as barrages of Hezbollah rockets from across the border. It's extremely effective at countering those. But the things taking out many of the larger Iranian targets are the Arrow long-range interceptor and a medium-range system called David Sling. Both are extremely effective and both have been combat-proven many times over. So commentators, for your credibility, try and get the basic facts right. Switching back to Australia, we had the news a few days ago that HMS Anson, a Royal Navy Astute-class submarine, is visiting Australia and has docked at HMAS Stirling for a month of maintenance, which the government has claimed is an amazing achievement and marks a major milestone for AUKUS. No, it doesn't. What it does show is how desperate the United Kingdom is for Australian cash. HMS Anson seems to be the only SSN the UK has at the moment capable of putting to sea. The other 4 are tied up for repairs and maintenance, and there's a newer submarine, HMS Agamemnon, the 6th in the series, which is undergoing sea trials. We can all see Russia behaving threateningly at the moment, and that has a naval dimension with warships and submarines being pushed into the North Atlantic and even the North Sea. And I think it's hugely telling that the UK government believes it is more important taking Anson away from the immediate defence of the UK and undertaking nothing more than an AUKUS publicity stunt. This is a sign of how totally desperate the UK is for Australian dollars. Now, let's be frank, their economy hasn't recovered from Brexit, and it won't. The structural damage is too great. This means it is impossible for the UK to fund all of their defence procurements from within existing resources. But in comes Australia and the future SSN AUKUS, previously known as SSNR, R standing for replacement. It was a virtual certainty that this was going to be scrapped or indefinitely postponed until Australia turned up in 2021 or 2022 with a huge fistful of dollars that they waved in front of UK admirals. I bet they could not believe their luck. UK defence planning, at least for submarines, is now totally dependent on Australian cash handouts such as this current massive $4.8 billion series of advance payments to Rolls Royce, a hugely profitable company. And more importantly, even than that, Australia is paying half of the development costs of the SSN AUKUS program, which will be many billions of dollars on top of that. And just a reminder about the Geelong Treaty, enthusiastically signed by Defence Minister Richard Marles. SSN AUKUS is a British-designed submarine to meet British requirements. There is no Australian input. Australia will be involved as observers, and I assume many of our Navy and Defence personnel will be in the project office, providing a great deal of help, for which we will be picking up the bill, while we will be informed about what is going on and will have no actual say in any of the decisions. Now, for several decades, as I know well, RAN submariners, supported by the entire defence hierarchy, insisted that Australian submarines absolutely had to be a bespoke design because of our unique environment. But all of that has been thrown away, completely unceremoniously ditched, and we, the Australian public, are now being told that whatever is good enough for the RN and the USN will be good enough for us. Speaking of cash, Defence Industry Minister Pat Conroy has been in the UK giving away another $310 million gift to nuclear reactor company Rolls Royce, which is a massively super profitable international organisation. The minister, of course, claims it isn't a gift, but is actually for physical reactor components that will go into the finished product in, I don't know, about 15 years' time. And I have to say that 15 years seems an awfully long lead time, and I would be very interested in a briefing from Rolls Royce or Defence or a reactor expert to explain that to me. But the chances of that happening are precisely zero. Now, how was the figure of 310 million arrived at? Well, we have absolutely no idea. But what I can say with certainty is that all of that money should be being spent on Australian engineering and manufacturing companies, not just handed over to Rolls Royce. Now, I don't know exactly what the money will be spent on, but the implication is these long lead time items, which might include things like pumps and valves. There is absolutely no reason why Australian companies such as Hoffman Engineering, Veeam, Morand, or even BAE Systems could not be doing that work in Australia. If Australian companies are good enough to be supplying titanium components for F-35 Joint Strike Fighters, then they are good enough to be supplying components to the UK made out of the required materials and manufactured to correct tolerances. My fear is that the Defence Industry Minister has once again been conned by the RAN and his department. There's a rich history of this, and I thought he might have learnt his lesson by now, but apparently not. If I had been one of his advisors, let me explain how I would have handled this. I would have asked for a briefing for the Minister from Defence and told people to bring schematics of the parts that we were going to pay for. Now, assuming there was nothing complicated or secret about them, I would have insisted that the department use those same schematics to get quotes from Australian industry for their manufacture here. And let me remind people of some facts. Nuclear reactor technology is not especially complex. Reactors are built on the principle of an external combustion engine, very much the same as that of steam locomotives that powered the world's railways for a couple of 100 years. The heat source to make water boil is uranium rather than coal, but the overall physics is the same. Naval reactors are more demanding because of their small size, and they need to keep on working when submarines are at different angles and are manoeuvring. There's quite a bit of top secret stuff about how the fuel is configured, and I'm not going to go into that, even though the Chinese and Russians already know exactly what's involved. But the production of valves and pipes, there's nothing inherently more difficult in doing that than for other military projects, as I've said, such as the F-35, in which Australian industry is playing an important role. My theory is that most, if not all, of these AUKUS decisions are being made in the exclusive clubs of London or Washington golf courses by a handful of admirals and senior bureaucrats, and Australia is simply going along with whatever we are being told. I have little doubt that Minister Conroy has received advice from his department. Oh, Minister, no, Minister Australia doesn't have the skills, or Minister Australian industry couldn't possibly meet the timetable, and a whole lot of other nonsense. And I think, to his shame, he is taking all of this at face value rather than pushing back and questioning the rubbish that he's being told. As I have said in other podcasts, there is no AUKUS industrial uplift happening in Australia, at least not of any consequence. We are pouring huge amounts of concrete, but that's not adding to our industrial capability. All of that is happening in the US and the UK, and it's partly funded with billions of Australian dollars that should be being spent here. In answering questions in London, Minister Conroy said, this is a quote, So the critics of AUKUS confound me because often they operate in a fact-free environment where hitting every milestone and the practical manifestation of the cooperation is occurring every day. Well, Minister, I'm obviously one of those critics, so allow me to retort. But before doing that, for a bit of context, I give Pat Conroy more credit than some other ministers, such as Richard Marles, because he occasionally, and I believe sincerely, tries to engage with the media, not nearly as often as I would like, but something is better than nothing. So let me try and explain to the minister that meeting artificially generated deadlines of your own, such as the date of the visit of a nuclear-powered British submarine or the payment schedule of billions of dollars to the United States, these things are not measures of progress, not in the slightest. It's like saying the construction of my house is going exactly to schedule because I've made the down payment on the agreed time. That doesn't go to the matter of work commencing and to work running on schedule. Now, quickly to a couple of other things, because the bombing of Iran has taken everything off the front page, and there is the small matter of whether Australia should or shouldn't join Donald Trump's Board of Peace. This is the thing that's meant to be the rebuilding of Gaza, but who knows what its true purpose might be. It's important to have a look at which countries have joined and which have declined. And remember, there appears to be a joining fee of $1 billion, and that money will be administered not by the United States or some sort of government entity, but personally by Donald Trump. And given how he and his family are massively enriching themselves via the US presidency, I have grave concerns about where all that money is going to end up. Those who have said yes include, apart from the United States, obviously, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, Indonesia, Pakistan, Qatar, the UAE, Israel, and Mongolia. And if you don't mind me saying so, that looks to be a fairly motley group of countries, and I'm not sure that Australia would want to be associated with many of them. Now, let's have a look at who has had the courage to say no. And that includes most of Europe, and in our region, countries that have a spine, a moral compass, include the Republic of Korea, Singapore, and New Zealand. Even little New Zealand has had the courage to say no. But Australia, of course, is hiding for cover, once again too terrified to say or do anything, no matter how minor, that might upset the Trump administration. Now, at this point, I'm going to quote a little bit more from the Joe Tarnowski article that I referenced in the previous podcast, the former chief of staff to Richard Marles. I'm surprised that this hasn't attracted more attention from the mainstream media, because this is an insight from inside the government. And I assume the government will dismiss it if it ever comes up as sour grapes. I mentioned that she had a falling out with Minister Marles, but it does not read like that at all. It's factual and analytical. Anyway, here goes with another few direct quotes. This is Joe Tarnowski. For several years now, the public debate around AUKUS has gone in familiar circles. How much will it cost? Do the United States or the United Kingdom have the industrial capacity to meet their side of the arrangement? Will the submarines arrive on time or at all? These are valid questions, but they are not the only ones we should be asking. The full cost of AUKUS can't be measured in budgets, delivery schedules, or shipyard capacity alone. It must reckon with something less tangible but more consequential: Australia's silence. Within the Australian government, the US sits at the centre of defence and security thinking. It is embedded in the system's DNA. Contemplating a world in which the alliance is weakened, conditional, or unreliable is often dismissed as a fantasy before it is genuinely examined. And a little bit later in the same article, she says, Australia's centering of the US is visible not only in policy settings, but in the physical spaces where power is exercised. The walls of the Defence Minister's parliamentary office are lined with his enlarged photos of America's landmarks. Shelves are devoted to US history and politics, topped with White House memorabilia and gift-boxed flags from the Pentagon. Richard Marles's ministerial office in Geelong displays a framed certificate signed by the then Kentucky governor when Marles was commissioned a Kentucky colonel. When an alliance becomes this embedded, it becomes difficult to question. Alternatives no longer feel conceivable, certain risks stop being interrogated, and silence becomes the path of least resistance. Hear, exactly, Joe Tarnowski. That's all I've got time for today. Next time, I'll be talking about a huge deal between South Korea and the UAE that will help the UAE to the tune of about $35 billion worth of defence projects being developed. It's an opportunity that Australia looks to have missed out on. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye for now, and see you next time.
That's today's Asia Pacific Defence Reporter. For more in-depth articles, expert opinions and exclusive interviews, visit AsiaPacificDefenceReporter.com. Stay informed, stay ahead. This is your source for all things defence. Until next time.